It's Friday night. It's the preview show. It's the No Nay Never podcast.
Hello and welcome to the preview show brought to you by the No Nay Never podcast. I'm your host Natalie Bromley, and joining me as ever is the headliner of the preview show, the main man himself, Dave Statman Roberts. Dave, how are we?
Hello Natalie, I'm very well, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And guess what? We've got a special guest.
We have.
Who have we got, Dave? Who's coming to play out with us at the preview show?
We've got Tom Whittaker this week joining us. Hello, Tom.
Good evening. How are we? All right?
Yeah, we're good. Thanks. Thought I'd lost you there for a brief second.
Know,
Tom, this is becoming a habit. You're going to start being a regular, proper friend of the preview show. I love it.
It's nice. It's exciting. I always feel like I've been let behind the curtain every time I come on. So, yeah, it's a pleasure to be on again. Thanks very much for having me.
No, you're welcome. Now, the reason why we've got Tom on, and we have only got him for the first probably 10 minutes of the show, just because of a few clashes, is that we've had some diary clashes this week, which made it very, very difficult to get the team together to do a full analysis show of that Southampton game. So we're going to speak to Tom in the first 10 minutes of the show just to have a quick chat about what on earth happened at the weekend, which really wasn't the return to football that we wanted after that 3-week gap. And then obviously we'll let Tom go off, and Dave and I will carry on with your preview show. So we're going to have a bit of both this week, which is exciting. Tom, you're going to have to cheer me up about the football, because I'm just feeling very down in the dumps about that collapse, and I'm struggling to just understand what on earth happened.
Yeah, that really does sum it up for me. It was so unlike us, so strange. The only sort of factor that I could think that really had a big impact was the fact that we hadn't played for a few weeks. Like, normally, obviously, with the injuries we've had, we've been crying out for maybe a week or two off, but I think 3 weeks did throw us quite a lot. I think it's knocked our rhythm out a little bit, I think, perhaps, especially with players being away. Some are away, some aren't. I think that did make it difficult. I think that's the only thing I could really put it down to. But it looked like from the first sort of 20-25 minutes, it looked like a carbon copy of the Everton game. You know, we were on top, playing them off the park, carving them open, creating chances, a few goals in front, and you just, I had a tweet where I said that I could not see Southampton scoring 2 goals that came back to bite me. But yeah, at that time I really was baffled that could happen. I didn't see anything from Southampton in the first 20-25 minutes, and the majority of times we played Southampton, I've not seen anything from them. So, it was a real head scratch. I think you summed it up brilliantly there. It's just, I don't know where that's come from, but hopefully it's just not something that we see again between now and the end of the season. Hopefully it's just one of those days. Put it down to that and move on.
Yeah, definitely, because I think somebody did tweet me about this, forgive me, I can't remember who it was, and said, we didn't have this kind of doom and gloom after the fantastic Everton result. And it is a bit difficult, really, because you and I, Tom, have talked about this before, where you get a little bit frustrated with some games, and you look at, say, for Everton, for example, and go, well, why can't you play like that every single week? Why can't you dominate? Why can't you pass the ball? Why can't you pull goals out like that? It really frustrates me then. Then you can go from having that Everton game to then having the Southampton game. And I think sometimes we have to have a bit of a reality check and realise that, well, the reason why we can't play that every single week is because we're Burnley. And the reason why the players can't turn that on every single week is because they are 10, 12 million pound players and they play for Burnley. If they could do that every week, they would be worth 50, 60 million and they'd be playing for Manchester City. And I think that's fair without being disrespectful to us as a club. I think that's a good realistic point. But I'm a little bit concerned about just a lack of discipline that I saw in that second half particularly. And there just didn't seem to be just the right application to the game. And I do wonder, Tom, whether just this whole season, as it has been, with no fans in the stadium and the type of games they've had to come, I guess where I'm getting at from this is do we take anything from this season and a few cracks in the plaster, for want of a better expression? Or is it the fact that we have got more of an ageing squad and we are getting found out a little bit more, and actually it's going to be just as tough next year?
I think this season is really hard to judge anyone really in terms of, I don't think you can really put this in a a long-term or historical context, there's some teams that have done really well out of playing in front of no fans. There's some teams with bigger squads who, you look at Man City, I don't think they'd have walked the league like they have if they hadn't rotated in the way they've been able to. You look at Liverpool, the injuries they've had from, and I don't think it's a coincidence that suddenly they've had 5 or 6 injuries at crucial times in this kind of weird season. I don't think we'd have had the start to the season we'd had if it hadn't been for the fact that we'd essentially had no pre-season and we're playing catch up in the first 5-6 games. And maybe if we'd won 2 or 3 of the first 7 or 8 games, we'd be 3 or 4 places higher up in the league, and you'd be wondering what the fuss was about. So I wouldn't read too much into it. That we know that there's underlying problems with the squad. It isn't big enough. We have got probably too many aging players. People like Bardsley, Peters, that are not long-term sort of people we can rely on. But at the same time, I don't think that's not been just this season, or it's been an issue for 2 or 3 years, and we've managed to paper over those cracks for the last couple 2 or 3 years, really. And I think we've got enough quality in the squad to do that. The real question is going to be, I think, it's going to be a massive summer in terms of ingoings and outgoings in the playing squad. That's where we're really going to know what we're in for next season. Obviously, rumours about the manager leaving as well. We know Pope's going to be in demand. We know Tarkowski's probably going to go. And it's what kind of money the board makes available and what kind of players we can bring in to replace these outgoings that is really going to make or break us. So I think for this season, basically, it's a weird season. We've not had a pre-season. We've had our injury problems, as have a lot of teams. Basically, all this season was about just getting it over the line, staying in the league, and then look for the summer to really kick on. And I think the fact that we've managed we're looking like we are going to do that with the resources we've had this season. I think it's got to go down as a good season, really. If you spend £1 million and you've got 100 million rates in, and you're setting yourself up for another 100 million next season, you've got to say you've done well, really. So it's a bad result yesterday, and we've had some bad results, but we've had some good results as well. We've had some historic wins. So overall, like I say, as long as we survive this season, we've had a good season, I think.
Yeah, I gave you the brief before the preview show to cheer me up, Tom, so I was a bit down in the dumps, and I think you certainly do that. You've always got a very good way of putting some perspective on it. And I think that brings me nicely on to just a general conversation. And I don't want to go too much into the game, because I think a lot of us were all still a little bit shell-shocked with what happened. I'm going to quickly talk about the penalty in a minute, because I do think there was a penalty shout for us to equalise at the end, which would have been a welcome, much undeserved, but also welcome point. But looking at the table now, are you genuinely convinced that we are going to stay up? I think we are now back to 6 points. Are we clear? Is it still 7? Is it still 7? I've completely lost where we are on the table. It is still 7. Obviously, there was the results went our way at the weekend, but if Fulham had have won, we'd have been looking over our shoulder a little bit. So there's still 9 games left to play. There's still a lot of point swings that could happen here, and Fulham do look like they're capable of picking up a win. Are you genuinely convinced now that we are going to survive?
Yeah, I always have been, and I think you made a good point there. I think that was the biggest positive we could take from the weekend, is even though we lost, nobody else won around us. There's only West Brom, and I don't think we've got to worry about them. Newcastle, good point, but it's only a point. Brighton lost from being ahead, Fulham lost from being ahead, and I think what you said there, Fulham, they do look capable of getting a win every now and again. They do, but it's the few and far between, and that kind of game, 1-0 up away from home with 10 minutes left and you're losing 3-1. They are capable of winning a game, yeah. Are they capable of winning 3 or 4 between now and the end of the season? I don't think they are, and they're going to need to win 4 to come above us. So, we're only going to need support ready for me, 2 wins on the board, and we're going to be safe. They've got a massive game, Fulham. They're playing tomorrow night, I think, Friday night at home to Wolves. That is a must-win for them, I think, because if they drop points in that one, Newcastle have got 2 games to play before Fulham play again. They've already got, they've already played a game more than everyone else, and all they did at the weekend was lose ground. So I think there's a lot of pressure on them. There's been a lot of talk this season about how good they are. Personally, I've not really seen it. Dribs and drabs, they have the odd good game, but they don't win enough for me. So I think the gap that we've got now is very, very close to being sufficient. And I think if we can win on Sunday, and if we can get another 2-3 points from somewhere else, then we're not going to have to worry about Fulham. I think they've left themselves with too much to do this late in the season.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well. And I think, if we beat Newcastle at the weekend, then, that keeps them down there as well. And you always want to have as many teams as you possibly can down there. You don't want it to just be a one-horse race. You want, you and one other. You want to have it with you and a couple of other teams as well. My other half, the current Mr. Bromley, says all the time that if you win 10 games in a Premier League season, you will survive. And I did challenge him on this not so long ago, and I had a look at the stats. You see, I'm pretending to be Statman Dave. Dave's going to be absolutely horrified that I'm pestering on his turf. I can see him shaking his head at me. But actually, it's true. If you look back at the Premier League seasons, you have to go back a lot of years, and it's not happened that often since a team around the time that this 40-point survival became, 40-point mark became survival. It's been a long time since anybody actually won 10 games and still went down. You look at the Premier League table, we've won 8. There's been a few occasions where somebody has stayed up with like 9 wins, but we've already won 8, so 2 more wins and we're definitely done. Fulham on the flip side have won 5 all season, with West Brom and Sheffield United only winning 4. Now Fulham have drawn quite a lot of games. They've drawn 11, but just converting those win rates, it has been really, really tough for them. I think if we beat Newcastle at the weekend, then I'll be pretty confident that we're going to survive again this season. I just think the thing that worries me a little bit is that, Brighton, West Brom, Fulham at home were very poor performances against other relegation candidates, and to get 3 draws from them, I was pretty disappointed. I think if we'd have won at least 2 of those games, we would have been well home and dry already. So it just worries me a little bit about the nerves about a must-win game at home. But hopefully Newcastle definitely don't have anything about them and will do it. Quick word then, we talk a lot about VAR and swings and roundabouts and things. We got away with one against, forgive me, I can't remember who it was. Was it the Wolves game? Which was a game where we Eric Peters should have had. Arsenal, it was well done, yeah. But then on the flip side, we should have really got one at St Mary's at the weekend to get the point. I think that late penalty shout for that handball was a blatant penalty.
Yeah, well, there was 2, wasn't there? I think there was a handball from Bertrand. It's a long ball. He watches it a long way. His arm's out. I don't know if he's controlling it, but I think he was quite lucky he didn't look at that. But then you've got the really obvious one reward, yeah. And it's one of them, like, if he doesn't connect with that ball, if he just drops to the floor, then it's a Stonewall penalty and a red card. But because he makes this effort to try and stay on his feet, and he does manage to play the ball, he doesn't go back and get looked at. And regardless of whether or not he's got his head to it, regardless of whether or not the keeper's had to make a save, the defender has fouled him. I think if he's got that extra yard from not being took back, he can angle himself and put that back in the corner and give the keeper no chance. And I don't understand how that isn't being viewed on the VAR. I don't know how that's not reviewed. I don't know, because it's not as if it's a subtle one where they've just knocked into each other. It's blatant. There's no attempt to play the ball. The only thing I can think is they've already missed a very clear and obvious one that they've had to go back and give on the VAR. Do they not want to embarrass the referee by giving another one? Is it one of them situations? We had Mike Dean where there was 2 or 3 where he got decisions very obviously wrong and he was getting death threats and had to be relegated. And I think part of the problem with VAR is it is refs looking after refs sometimes. And I did wonder, had we not had a penalty early in the game, and especially a VAR penalty early in the game, would that perhaps have been scrutinised a bit more carefully? But yeah, obviously the wrong decision. And like you say, although we wouldn't have deserved it and we were way too passive in that second half, way too slow to react to the changes that Southampton have made, that we could have sneaked out, dodged with the draw, and the way the results went, it would have been a fantastic point. So yeah, frustrating.
Well, I'm gonna let you go on that note, Tom. But you very much hit the brief. You did cheer us all up, and I think I'm gonna try and take a snippet of this preview show and listen to your wise words when I start to get nervous again towards the end of the season. I know Tom has to spend the vast majority of the season looking after me and telling me to calm down, because I get a little bit emotional and a bit hyperbole and start shrieking and going, "We're going to go down, it's all doom and gloom." And Tom just gives me a little on the head and says, "Shut up, you're going to be fine." So I'm going to play this on loop, I think, when it's done. But listen, thanks, Tom. Hopefully we will be able to get our diaries mixed next week and we'll be able to do a full analysis show on Newcastle, and we'll also look at some of the accounts as well, because we've got to look at them and a couple of other wider things, and like you say, those Dyche to Palace rumours. So let's hopefully we'll see you next week. But thank you very much for joining us. We'll let you go, and young Dave and I will carry on with the preview show. Brill, excellent. Oh, I do love it when Tom comes and joins us, young Dave. It's very exciting. But we now have a preview show that we need to get on with. Before we get into that, we obviously need to look at a quiz question, because at the end of the Southampton preview show, we had a question which related to Sunday matches, as the game at St Mary's was Burnley's 50th Premier League game to be played on a Sunday. Just going to remind our listeners what that question was, Dave, and it was: which team did Burnley beat to register our first top-flight win on a Sunday? What was that answer?
The correct answer to that question was Everton. It was actually also Burnley's first ever top-flight match played on a Sunday. We didn't, way back in the 70s when we were in the top flight then, they didn't play games on a Sunday. We didn't play our first game on a Sunday, I think, until 1983, which was against Millwall, but that was in a lower division. So in actual fact, our first ever top-flight game on a Sunday, which was the one against Everton, we won it. We won 1-0. Wade Elliott scored the goal, and that was the answer to the quiz question.
I think you pitched it a bit easy this week, Dave, because I did get it straight away, didn't I? Which is unlike me.
That's the benchmark. That's the benchmark. Yes, if you get it straight away, then I've definitely done it too easy.
Have you heard this, listeners? Dave is well mean to me. He always says this. If I get the answer straight away after the show, he always goes, "Oh man, too easy." I'm like, hey, I'm not that basic. But did we get any other correct answers, please, Dave?
We did. These people knew the correct answer. We had David Entwistle was in touch, knew it was Everton, as was Tim Holden, and also Adrian Caton. They all knew the correct answer was Everton.
Now, we had quite a late submission for an answer this week, didn't we, Dave? And we might be having to put you on some reins, because I think you're going to get a bit hardball with us, aren't you?
That was Adrian. Yeah, we've given Adrian the credit, but I think going forward we might have to consider having a cut-off time. I don't know what you think, Natalie, and what our listeners think about whether we should have a cut-off.
My view is I think if they get the answer in before we record the preview show, I think that's a good enough cut-off. I think.
I don't know. Sometimes with the questions, they do kind of come up in discussion when the match is on. So I was thinking maybe kick-off time. If you get it before kick-off, that's fair dues. But after that, then maybe not. I don't know.
I think you're putting an awful lot of faith in our listeners not Googling the answers, Dave. I'm just going to throw that out right now. You can go to a pub quiz and get told to put your phones away. We don't really have that level of control. I think young Dave's getting harsh. Well, actually, it's your show, Dave. It's your rules. If you say before the game starts, then we might have to put it in. We shall collaborate on that, listeners, and we will inform you next week. Maybe next season we'll bring that rule in. But I think we've got between now and the end of the season to change Dave's mind and make him realise that the later the better.
Opposition stats.
But enough of that. We are going to let you obviously have another quiz question at the end of the show, so do stay tuned. But before we do that, we have a preview to go through. And it is, of course, Newcastle United at home this Sunday, the 11th of April, which is a 12 o'clock kickoff live on Sky Sports. Dave, why don't you kick us off, see what I did there, with the recent history of this fixture?
Matches against Newcastle United have been relatively rare in recent times. Our paths have crossed in just 4 seasons since Burnley's first promotion to the Premier League in 2009. And prior to that, we hadn't played them since the 1980s. The Magpies were relegated in May 2009, and any Clarets fans who travelled down to London the night before our playoff victory against Sheffield United may recall finding a pub and watching them lose. That was a 1-0 defeat at Aston Villa on the last day of the Premier League season, and a defeat which confirmed their relegation. That match also resulted in a late red card in injury time at the end of the game for David Edgar. He'd go on to join Burnley just a few weeks later. They bounced straight back, whereas we had 1 season and then were relegated, so it wasn't until the 2014-15 season that our paths met. The Turf Moor meeting in December 2014 ended as a 1-1 draw. Since then, there have been 3 further meetings between the 2 teams at Turf Moor, with 2 Burnley wins, both by a 1-0 scoreline, as well as a 2-1 defeat in November 2018. And we're going to spare our listeners the details at this stage, as we're going to feature both of those wins, as well as our only Premier League defeat to Newcastle at Turf Moor, in some of our regular sections, starting with the next one.
Ooh, this is exciting.
Highlights and lowlights.
So let's move on then to our next section, which is going to be our low light and highlight. Kicking us off with the low light then. I'm intrigued now to see what's coming for the rest of the show. I'm going to have to keep my ears open. What's the low light, please, young Dave?
Well, as we mentioned, with just the one defeat in recent seasons, we've decided to select that as our low light for this episode. The match, which took place in November 2018, didn't get off to a very good start. In just the 4th minute, a shot from Kieran Clark from just outside the box took a massive deflection off Ben Mee to leave Joe Hart stranded, and the visitors were 1-0 up. And then, following a short corner, Matt Ritchie's cross was glanced in by the head of Kieran Clark again. He made it 2-0 to Newcastle. And although Sam Vokes managed to pull a goal back before the break with a very well-taken header, there was no further score in the second half, and the match ended up as yet another defeat in what was a very dismal first half of the 2018-19 campaign.
Yeah, boo. Let's cheer us all up then with the highlight of this fixture. Oh, I like this picture you've put on here. Go on, tell our listeners what I'm looking at.
Well, with 2 home wins for Burnley in recent seasons, it was a toss-up this week for which match we featured as our highlight and which one we would keep back and use as our hero feature. Both were narrow 1-0 wins, but we've gone for the win from October 2017 as our highlight. The match, you may recall, marked the 5th anniversary of Sean Dyche being appointed as Burnley manager, and the players rewarded him and us with a victory and all 3 points. We had to wait, though, as it wasn't until the 74th minute that Jeff Hendrick, who is now a Newcastle player, of course, scored the only goal for the Clarets in front of the cricket field stand. Jack Cork's shot had been saved, but the ball came back to Johan Berg Gudmundsson, who crossed to Jeff Hendrick. He chested the ball down and fired a shot in past Rob Elliott from 3 yards, and it proved to be the winning goal. That's our highlight for this week.
Oh, dear. I miss Jeff Hendrick, I wish we hadn't have sold him. I know he divided fans, but I do miss him.
Fixture flashback.
Well then, turning to our new feature for this half of the season. Dave, next year, we absolutely have to do something about the names of these fixtures. You sit here every single week and you laugh at me because I get tongue-tied and I can't say these words. And our poor listener must just be like, for God's sake, woman, learn how to speak. So,
just call it Matchday Memories, no one will know.
Yes, our Matchday Memories, our fixture flashback feature, which is the first of our new features for the second half of this season. This is, of course, the one which your chance to get involved in the preview show. Dave, talk us through this section, please. What's going on? Do we have one? Do we not have one?
Well, each week we're asking our listeners to send us matchday memories from a particular game from the past against our next opponents to be featured on the relevant preview show. For this episode, unfortunately, we didn't receive any audio recordings, but there were a couple of brief recollections from a match which we're going to feature in our Heroes and Villains section. So we're going to wait and mention them when we cover off that section shortly. However, we have planned ahead, and we already have an excellent listener contribution for our Manchester United preview show. That's not to say we wouldn't feature another if you'd like to get in touch. After that, we're away at Wolves, so start thinking of past matches at Molineux to see if there's a particular memory you'd like to share. And as always, you can DM us on Twitter, that's @NoNayNever, or send us an email, podcast@noNayNever.net. And although we're more than happy to read out written submissions, we particularly enjoy the audio recordings. I think they do get good listener feedback as well. We've mentioned this before, but the easiest website to use to make a recording and send us a link of the audio is vocaroo.com. That's VOCAROO.com. It's free to use, no registration required, and it's really, really simple.
Let's move on then to, you know what? I say this every week, but our listeners need to get involved with the flashback feature. Otherwise, we're going to have to bin it next year because the uptake's not been good. You guys are too shy. Send us your voice recordings. We like it.
Heroes and Villains.
Heroes and villains then, please. Who have we picked as our hero? I daren't ask you who you picked for the villain, but let's go with hero first.
As we mentioned earlier, there was one other recent home win for Burnley over Newcastle, and that was in last season's meeting at Turf Moor, which took place in December 2019. Despite being our top scorer again this season, with 7 goals so far, Chris Wood seems to have taken quite a bit of flack from some quarters, although he needs just 3 more goals to reach double figures again in Premier League games for the 4th consecutive season. It was his goal in the 58th minute which ensured Burnley's 1-0 win in the corresponding fixture from last season. A good delivery from a corner by Ashley Westwood found Chris Wood, who headed the ball in to score the only goal of the game. The New Zealander was the hero that day, like he has been on so many other occasions since joining the club in 2017. And we can only wonder where we might be now without Chris Wood's goals over the last 4 seasons.
Yeah, definitely. Although I was cross with him for losing that ball that led to the third goal on Saturday, but we're going to let him off for that because he's done better than he's done worse. Oh God, I daren't ask this. This is becoming a controversial section, is this one? Who have you picked as the villain? Please don't tell me you've gone rogue again, Dave.
No, I think it's more understandable this week. Although, having said that, we picked Danny Ings as the villain in our last preview show, and he lived up to that, didn't he? In his goal he scored and involvement in the game.
He certainly did. That has not gone unforgotten, young Dave. I'm putting that in the retribution.
Anyway, for our villain for this episode, we've gone back a little bit further in time. From a match which took place at Turf Moor on Boxing Day in 1975. Burnley were struggling towards the bottom of the old First Division, and although Clarets fans didn't know it at the time, this would be the club's last season in the top flight for over 33 years. With just a couple of minutes left to play, it seemed as if Burnley might have earned themselves a valuable point. But the visitors were awarded a late penalty after Burnley keeper Jerry Payton brought down Mickey Burns in the box, and Newcastle United's Scottish midfielder Tommy Craig sent in the resulting spot kick to give them a late lead. There was little doubt that the award of the penalty was the correct decision, although Burnley were denied a spot kick by referee Walter Johnson just a minute later when Peter Noble was brought down in the box at the opposite end. Some things don't change, it would seem. Anyway, we tweeted out a match summary from the game, and some of our followers replied with their memories. Andy Mack, who's AndyBFC62 on Twitter, remembers watching the game as a 13-year-old in the cricket field stand with his dad, and remembers the disappointment of that late goal. Gutted was the word he used. And meanwhile, Todd Claret was also in the cricket field stand, as he had a season ticket in there with his granddad, but they missed the end of the game, including Newcastle's penalty and Burnley's penalty claim, as they'd gone to queue for tickets for the FA Cup tie at Blackpool. He remembers hearing the roar from the away fans when Tommy Craig's penalty went in. So for scoring that late winner and adding to Burnley's woes on Boxing Day back in 1975, Tommy Craig is our villain this week.
Excellent. That's a really good. I like the fact that we put the fixture flashback feature inside the villain one. That's a good villain this week. That's how it should be. None of this sticking Danny Ings in there and all sorts of heroes from the past. I think we stick to that, Dave. Well done. That's a good villain section this week. I like it. It's my favourite one. So who's refereeing? Who have we got in the middle? Who's going to not give us a penalty this week?
Well, him or the VAR. We'll come on to that shortly. Anthony Taylor of Wythenshawe will be in charge again at Turf Moor for this Sunday's game against Newcastle United. He's already refereed 3 Burnley matches so far this season, and all 3 have ended in draws, as well as a goalless draw against West Brom at the Hawthorns last October. He was at Turf Moor for the 1-1 draw with Everton in December, and was also the referee for our 1-1 draw when Brighton were the visitors in February. This will be the 20th Burnley match he's taken charge of, and so far there have been 6 Burnley wins, 6 draws and 7 defeats in the previous 19. The video assistant referee on Sunday will be Stuart Atwell, and we can only hope that he pays more attention to blatant shirt pulling than John Moss did last Sunday, when he was unable to spot Jan Bednarek trying to swap shirts with Chris Wood in the penalty area while the match was still in progress.
Yeah, I'm still bitter about that. But let's not dwell on that, because our Burnley fans, we've moved on. That's the beauty of football, isn't it, Dave? There's always another week. There's always another week.
You may have
There's always
moved
another
on, I
season.
haven't.
No, I haven't. I'm lying. But you know what? I was trying to take a leaf out of Tom Claret's book and gee our listeners up.
Statman Dave's Stat of the Week.
Let's not leave it there, though. And I'll tell you how we can gee our listeners up, and that is by letting your listeners have your bonus super present miscellaneous stat of the week.
This week's stat is, ever since English football started up again last June under the banner of Project Restart, every single Premier League game has been broadcast live in the UK. This means the number of Burnley games which have been broadcast live in the UK has risen. And this week will reach a new landmark, as the match against Newcastle United at Turf Moor will be the 200th Burnley game to be covered. Here are some stats relating to our previous 199 live matches. Only 15 of them were broadcast prior to 2000. 166 have been league matches during the regular season, with another 33 matches in various cup competitions and also playoff games. 98 of them have been Premier League games, which also means that the next game we play after this weekend, which is Manchester United away, will be our 100th Premier League match to be broadcast live in the UK. Overall, from the previous 199 live games covered in the UK, there have been 72 Burnley wins, 38 draws and 89 defeats.
Wow, that's a good start. And it's kind of funny how our Premier League adventure started at home with Manchester United, and it was the fixture we were all looking forward to, and our 100th Premier League game ends up being Old Trafford. And I know United have had their ups and downs recently, but there's still a global pull. It's still the name, and it's still the fixture that everybody wants to go and play, doesn't it? Just find it just quite a nice twist that United away is going to be our 100th broadcasted game. Well, before Dave and I go on to have a look at the game and decide whether we think we're going to win, lose, draw, and who's going to score and by what manner, as we tend to do, we do have an opposition view for you. And this week we spoke to Hodge from the Talk of the Toon podcast to get his views ahead of the game.
Opposition view.
Hi guys, thanks for having us on. It's Hodgie from Talk of the Toon football podcast. Just to kind of give a couple of opinions and stuff on Newcastle United at the minute. Been quizzed with some of the stuff like, are we going to be surviving the drop? I think it's going to be very, very hard for us to try and pull something out of the bag, especially with our kind of run of form. Fulham seem to be the ones that are giving us the biggest run for money. They are actively trying to play football and wanting to try and push and win games, whereas we seem to be holding back and trying to just secure something. That's the worst thing for me and everyone else at the Talk the Toon. We want to see our team try and strive to become better, and it just doesn't seem that way. It seems to be going a bit backwards under Bruce still. I think we can pride ourselves in calling it all correct and giving one back against all the pundits that have supported Bruce earlier on in the season, where we were saying we're getting very lucky with results, which we were, and it's kind of come to fruition now that he is poor manager. And his press conferences, he's got no confidence in those. He just comes out and spins another load of lies and just same kind of bull, really, which is never what you want. You want someone to come out who's a bit more charismatic and have a bit of faith in the person who's going to come and turn your team around, but he just doesn't seem like he's going to do it. I mean, we've got Burnley coming up, then we've got West Ham, who are challenging for Champions League, Liverpool, Arsenal, Leicester and City, before we have two of what you would say easier games, which is Sheffield United and Fulham towards the end of the season. Could go right down to the wire, and it could go down to that Fulham game. Let's hope it doesn't and change it, and our luck kind of changes by then. You've also asked about the summer changes if we do stay up. Obviously Bruce is going massively for us. If he doesn't go, it'll just be the same kind of stuff again. Ashley, who's the club owner, he doesn't want to be there neither. You could tell like the sale was in his head. He thought it was all kind of gone through and done and dusted with the PIF, but it wasn't to be. He didn't put money in kind of January or even at the start of the season because he thought the deal was kind of done and dusted. Kind of bit us in the bum now, and it's not been the best. I mean, people that he's brought in recently have not made much change. I mean, Callum Wilson has been amazing and excellent in ASM. They've been the two standouts, but they've been injured, and there's no excuse to have kind of a backup. Joelinton has never been a backup. He's been an absolute waste of time and money. I think quite a lot of people are in the same mind as us with that. So kind of whoever really knows. Ahead of the game against you guys at Turf Moor, line-up, I could probably see us doing something similar to what we did with Spurs. Kind of a 5 at the back, kind of 4, it changed quite often, and people were pushing out in different positions, and it was quite fluid, which was a bit of a fresh air change compared to what we have seen in the past. ASM should be back in the starting lineup. He did get some game time against Spurs, so I'd love to see him in there. And I think there's talk that Callum Wilson might be back. If he is, it'd be great, but I don't see him starting just because of the injuries that he had. He might get some game time at the end, but who really knows? Score, not too sure what to predict here. I'd love to see a win for Newcastle, but it really, who knows what could happen. We can sometimes turn up and play okay and still get beat. There's sometimes where we just lay over and get our bellies scratched, and it's quite embarrassing sometimes. So I think I'm going to try and be positive and say something good, and I think we might be 2-1 to Newcastle. So best of luck to you guys. Not too much though, because we need it more than you guys right now. Thanks for having us again. I'll catch you in a bit. Cheers. Bye.
So, Dave, putting aside our disappointment of that collapse at Southampton and our desire to get a couple more wins on the board to secure Premier League survival, and also looking at this game in respect to the last 3 winnable games we had at Turf Moor, how are we feeling?
I think it'll be a tough game, we know that. I think Newcastle have maybe, even though they didn't get the win, they'll have taken some confidence from the result at the last weekend.
Yeah.
They know that from their point of view, defeats are no good. Draws aren't that good. They need wins, really. So I don't know whether that will affect their play, whether they'll approach the match differently from that perspective. I don't know whether that plays into Burnley's hands if they do. If they play a more open, expansive game, maybe Burnley are able to play a bit more on the break, be a bit more expressive and get ahead that way. I don't know, but I think it's going to be tight still, but I'm going to go for a Burnley win. I think Burnley are going to win, and I think it might be 1-0.
Dave, this is bold of you. I love it. It's not usually you to be this confident. I think I'm just nervous with how we played those home fixtures against Fulham and West Brom and Brighton, and the games that you just can't afford to lose. And we've ended up on those games playing just far too withdrawn and far too nervous, and just end up trying to go for a point rather than really going for it and trying to actually beat these teams and take matters into our own hands. And I think sometimes Dyche can get a little bit tempted to do that. He likes to play it tight, and he likes to say, look, just stay in the game and try and nick it, fine margins and all of that. So I'm not feeling that comforted, to be honest. That said, I think we are a better side than Newcastle, and I think we've got enough about us to... and the fact, if we can play like we did for those first 20 minutes, I don't think Newcastle have the ability to turn it around like Southampton did. Southampton are a much stronger side. I don't think that they've got the ability to turn down. So if we play like we did in the first half an hour and control the game, it should be job done. I'm also going to predict a win, Dave, but I'm going to say 2-0. So who are you going to have as a scorer?
Chris Wood.
I'm also going to go Woody, and I'm going to do the same as I did with Southampton. Chris Wood and a Ben Mee header. There you go. I think that's it. Do we want to left foot, right foot, header? No, I think that's enough. But listeners, we want you to tell us what you think the goal prediction is going to be. You can tweet us at knownandever, or you can email us at podcast@knownandever.net. We want to know prediction, scorers, and how those goals are going to go in. Dave, what are we looking like for injuries for the game? Have we got anybody who's struggling? I can see you've left me some notes.
Well, when we're recording, obviously because it's a Sunday match, they won't do the pre-match press conference till the Friday afternoon, so doesn't really fit in with our recording schedules. So we won't know for definite any other confirmation. We know that Kevin Long he came back from internationals with a calf injury, we think. So he's looking unlikely, but he probably wouldn't have been in the starting 11 anyway. Robbie Brady had an injury, so we're not sure again how that's progressed, but I think I'd be doubtful he's going to be involved. Eric Peters has a thigh injury, and Ashley Barnes is out as well. So it's one of those where it's probably going to be similar to what we had previously, other than obviously Eric Peters was starting the game. He came off injured, didn't he? But Newcastle have their injury problems as well.
We've got Charlie Taylor, haven't we?
Charlie Taylor's back. Newcastle have their injury problems as well. They've got sort of 5 or 6 injuries as well, and there's a couple of their players, Isaac Hayden, Fabian Schär, who are out for the season. So it's probably much for a muchness between the two teams from that perspective. Although they have been missing Callum Wilson, haven't they? He's not been playing for them either. So he's a goal threat for them, and he's one of those players who, if he was in the team, that might give them some more impetus. So I think from that point of view, the two teams are fairly evenly matched. Home advantage doesn't have the same advantage it once had. There's been a lot more away wins this season than we've usually seen. So that probably doesn't have as much bearing as it otherwise would. But I think if we can play like we did in the first half hour against Newcastle, play like we did against Everton, put on a good performance, I think we'll come out with a victory. I'm confident of the win.
Excellent.
Fantasy Premier League update.
Right, well, let's leave that there because I think that wraps up what we were going to do for the preview show. And let's move on to the second half of our show, which is, of course, looking at the much coveted and highly competitive known and ever Fantasy Premier League. Now, we should be able to give full week, as in we've had a full game week, haven't we? Game week 30 is now complete. Dave, whereabouts are we up to with the Fantasy League?
We are up to date, yeah, because the way the fixtures fell means that we've got the full week, game week 30, and we're able to bring you an update of the latest standings at the top of the No Nay Never Fantasy Premier League following the completion of game week 30. So we've got, in reverse order, our top 5. Our first 3 are non-movers. We've got Chris Stanworth in 5th place on 1,950. We've got Gary Proctor still in 4th place, also on 1,950. Adam Dennett, again a non-mover, in 3rd on 1,966. And then we've got a change in the top 2. We've got Charlie Binns now, who's in 2nd position. He's also on 1,966, but we have a new leader. Sean Dyche. Sean Danaher's at the top. 1,978 points. We had him as a guest. I don't think it was one you were on, Natalie. It was when me and Matt.
No, it's when I was missing. Yeah.
That's right, yeah. Sean came on, and he's now our leader. He's ahead, 1,978, a lead of 12. Still plenty of weeks to go, so there's still plenty to play for. I've looked a little bit further down. There's also 4 other managers who are still within 50 points of that current top 5. So there's still some hope for them, especially if they've kept hold of any of their chips, which might help to boost their score in the vital running. So the triple captain, the bench boost, the free hit and the wild card. If you've not used all of those already, that can help to just push you that little bit extra if you need it towards the end. So we'll see if that has a bearing as we close in on the final games.
Indeed. I'm assuming I'm one of those 4 managers who are within 50 points of the top honour?
No.
Oh.
You want to know where you are?
Yeah, always.
You've not gone down, which is the good news. You're a non-mover. You're in 223rd place still with 1,292 points. I'm up a couple of places to 124th. I've got 1,645 points, so that's only, about 350 ahead of you. The leader in our podcasters mini league is still Richard Steele. He's now in 75th position with 1,772 points.
Ah, man. I'm doing all right. I think I'm doing better than I was last season. I'm actually doing things with my team each week, which is what I didn't do last season. I just didn't do any of them. I'm actually using those free transfer things, and I still don't understand what those magic buttons do, but I'm trying. I'm still doing things each week. So let's move on anyway. Who do we have as the kings of game week 30, Dave?
If you had all 11 of these players, even without your captain score, you'd have got 141 points. That would have helped you move up the table a little bit. But we had a 3-5-2 formation. So as well as Alisson in goal, we had a back 3 of Mendy, Alexander-Arnold and Coleman. The midfield 5 was Pereira, Trezeguet, Harrison, Redmond and Lingard, and a front 2 was Kane and Callum Robinson. Had a West Brom player in there. They obviously had a very good result Very surprising result, win over Chelsea last weekend.
Good stuff. Well, the second of our new features for this season is obviously we take a look at what players we need to watch from the opposition team, and you do that based on their fantasy Premier League points. So, who are our 3 to watch from Newcastle, please?
Well, I think our 3 to watch may well be a 1 to watch because 2 of them I don't think will be playing. Callum Wilson is their top scorer with 116. Goalkeeper Carl Darlow has 80. And Miguel Almiron has 79. But of those 3, Callum Wilson hasn't played since game week 23 due to injury. Martin Dubravka has been playing in goal in place of Carl Darlow for the last 5 games, so it may be that Miguel Almiron will be the only one of the 3 to start Sunday's game, but we might find out more as we approach the weekend in terms of the press conferences, and then also definitely at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning when the teams are announced.
Good stuff. Well, I think looking ahead at the fixtures, I think we're probably going to be able to do a full update again next week, are we, Dave?
We are. The week after that, we can't. But for next weekend, looking at the way the fixtures fall, we can do another full week, and then we'll think going forward and have do something different for the other week. Either get another guest on or go into a bit more detail on some of the stats and things on the Fantasy Premier League.
Excellent. Well done. Thanks, Dave.
Statman Dave's quiz question.
So finally then, let's close out our preview show with the quiz question. What have you set our listeners this week?
Well, this week's quiz question relates to Burnley's past matches against Newcastle United, and I have made it tougher this week. So, prior to Sean Dyche's time as Burnley manager, who was the last Burnley player to score against Newcastle United at Turf Moor?
Ooh, that's a good question. How do our listeners submit their answers?
Well, you can get in touch to let us know your answers using any of these methods. Tweet us or preferably send us a direct message on Twitter. That's at NoNayNever. You can email us, podcast@nonaynever.net, or you can reply to the post for this preview show, which go up on either the No Nay Never Facebook page or also on YouTube, and we'll reveal the correct answer as we usually do at the start of the next preview show.
Good stuff. Have we got any community news, fixture news, any other business that we need to let our listeners know before we let them go for the weekend's game, Dave?
Yeah, there was a couple of things I was going to mention. First of all, we do have a competition winner to announce. After we interviewed Paul Weller during the last international break, he kindly agreed to let us have a copy of his brand new biography. And after the Easter bank holiday weekend, we selected a winner. That was Matty Boosh. So well done to Matty, who we've already been in contact with to win his prize of Paul Weller's book. That's Not Such a Bad Life. He's written it with Dave Thomas, and it's out on next week, actually, the 12th of April, which is good timing for bookshops reopening, although it's also available online or directly from Paul himself. If you want to get in touch with him, he's Paul Weller18 on Twitter, and you can get books directly from him, and I'm sure he'll sign them as well. And another thing to mention as well, I don't know whether you've picked up on this this week, another former Burnley player who you know, I think you've been on with him on Radio Lancashire, haven't you, in the past?
I have indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Another player who had a book out last year as well is the inspirational Len Johnrose. He's trying to raise awareness of motor neuron disease, MND, which he's been living with since being diagnosed in 2017. His latest fundraiser is the Icefoot 92 Challenge, which you may have seen on social media and also in the press as well as on radio and TV recently. It's been launched this week. If you don't already, you can follow Len on Twitter. He's L Johnrose on Twitter, or look out for the Icefoot92 hashtag, or visit the following Just Giving page. That's justgiving.com/crowdfunding/project92. And you can find out all about Len's Icefoot 92 challenge.
I shall indeed. I've not come across this yet, so I'm going to have a quick look. Oh gosh, the first one I speak to is Chris Sutton. That's the first hit I get on Twitter. Wow, you could have warned me about that, Dave. That's fine. Do we have anything else? I think all the fixtures we've already gone through, haven't we? I think that's everything, isn't it, for this week, Dave?
Yeah, we know that the Man United and Wolves game are both on Sundays, so all our April games are Sundays, and then they haven't announced the times and the kick-off dates for the games after that. So we'll have to wait. I'm guessing in a week or so they'll go ahead and do the next batch of probably the games from the early part of May.
Good stuff. Well, that is definitely all we have time for this week then. Listeners, we're going to let you go to enjoy the game and what will hopefully be a good win for Burnley to get us closer to that magic safety net. My thanks go to the usual contributors to the previous show. Firstly to Hedge from the Talk of the Toon podcast, his opposition view. To Turf Moor Stadium announcer Dominic Walker for the specially recorded previous show announcements. To Tom Whittaker, Claret Tom, for joining us again on the previous show and giving us a little bit of reaction to that Southampton game. To producer Matt for knitting all of this together and getting it out there. But most importantly, and always, to Dave Roberts, Statman Dave, the hero of the preview show, who, without his just hard work, all of this would not be possible. So thank you, Dave. You put in so much hard work to the show, and it's my favourite thing that I do all week. So thank you. Finally, thanks to you, the listeners, for downloading and listening to this episode. Your support is very much appreciated, and we will not be here without you. Hopefully, the rest of the team will be back on Tuesday with the analysis show, hopefully looking at a Newcastle win. And Dave and I will be back next Friday night for another preview show ahead of the next fixture. That's everything. So stay safe, guys. Enjoy next week. The latest lockdown restrictions will be lifted on Monday, and we'll be in roadmap step 3. We'll be able to go and sit in beer gardens and go into shops and get all our hair cut because we're all desperately in need of hairdressers. So I hope you're keeping well. I hope you're all looking after loved ones, looking after yourselves. If anybody's struggling as we come towards this next phase of lockdown, and you just need someone to talk to, the No Nay Never door is always open. If you want to be our pen pal, you can drop us an email. If you just want to interact with us on Twitter, you know where we are. We will be back next week. So in the meantime, take care. I've been Natalie Bromley. This has been the preview show brought to you by the No Nay Never podcast. Until next time.